there are legitimate concerns amongst our editors and in our newsrooms about any form of new legislation. And I should explain why there are those concerns. Because we feel that there are already quite a number of existing laws which gives the government powers, which, as you have used previously. So any further legislation is something that naturally causes concern in our minds because we have no sight of what shape or form that legislation might entail. And the reason why we believe that you should have a care in applying any new legislation is simply this. The news gathering process is not a neat and tidy one. Information doesn't come to us in a sort of completely nicely packaged form. It often comes to us in bits and pieces, some partial information, and it's incumbent on our journalists and our editors to go out there and check and verify and pull the strands together and interpret and make judgments. And in the process, sometimes you may get the complete picture, sometimes you may get assumptions which may not be entirely correct, and information might be put out which may not be the full picture. And we worry that if your legislation that you're proposing or you have in mind is so broad and so sweeping, it could impinge on our ability to do what we do day to day. So that's where we are concerned about. There's also the possibility of differences of interpretation or differences of opinion, which could then be labeled as deliberate falsehoods, which could have an impact on the willingness or the readiness of members of the public to share information with us. So for those reasons, we have said, please have a care in any new legislation that you propose or you're thinking about. And if you are minded to have new legislation, please focus your energies on the spectrum of fake news, which is really deliberate falsehoods that are being put out. And please focus your energies on ensuring a more level playing field between us and the distributors of content who should be held to account and should be held responsible for the information that they put out and they spread.
My final point comes back again to the issue of freedom of the press, as well as, because that really relates to the issue of trust. Many allegations about the press in Singapore being gagged, being directed to do or say things in certain ways. I want to hear your views really about what is freedom of the press and what would constitute legitimate constraints on those freedoms.
I think we hold the freedom of the press quite dear to our hearts because we are journalists. We want information to get out there. We want the ability to inform our readers, and we would be concerned about any attempts to constrain that, quite legitimately. But the freedom is not absolute because there are other freedoms which also need to be safeguarded. And I think that freedom needs to be contextual to our particular situation and our particular society. So, for example, we would be mindful of sensitivities regarding race and religion, for example, knowing that this is the nature of our society, knowing that the communities we serve expect of us to uphold that societal harmony. So we would not be willing or prepared to say publish the cartoons of the Prophet, for example. We're very clear in our minds that that would be contrary to the interests of the communities we purport to serve. Yes. So the freedom in that situation, we would exercise our own judgment on how it should apply.